Hey guys, what is up, and I welcome each and every one of you to a new League of Legends video. So today we'll be going over the biggest changes coming to patch 9.5, and there are quite a few changes to go over. So if you end up enjoying the video, then don't forget to hit that like button. And this video is going to be made in collaboration with ProGuides. If you're having issues winning games in League of Legends, then make sure to visit ProGuides.com, which has the best videos on getting better at League. They have courses with pro players, tier lists, matchup stats tools, and 24/7 challenger coaches. It has all the tools you need to get better at League of Legends, so check it out, the link is down below. So the first big change coming, and probably the biggest of the patch, is of course going to be the rework of Kayle and Morgana. So let's go over both of them very quickly, starting off with Kayle. So Kayle's rework makes the champion feel a lot different and similar both at the same time, and what I mean by that is that Kayle is still very much an auto attack focused champion. Kayle still is very weak early, but very powerful late game, except that's a lot more kind of over exaggerated now. But even with that being said, the transformations and abilities, some of them are of course new. For instance, the passive of Kayle now makes her a melee champion for the first 10 levels of League of Legends, and after level 11, you become a permanent ranged champion. Your E ability is an AoE auto attack kind of reset ability that just does a lot of damage and also works with your extra passive attacks. Your W can now heal yourself and an ally at the same time. Your Q ability is very kind of awkward to land, but it reduces resistances and slows by quite a lot as well. And your ultimate still makes someone invulnerable, but on top of that, also does a bunch of AoE damage. So with all that being said and done, Kayle essentially now is a lot weaker at the earlier parts of the game than she is on the live servers at the moment, which I think might be a big issue in solo queue. However, with that being said, the second you hit level 11, and especially the second you hit level 16, you become one of the strongest champions late game period. So Kayle is going to be the ultimate risk versus reward type champion in League of Legends. Again, you pick her early, you don't really do anything at all, and you pretty much pray that nothing bad happens, but if nothing bad does happen and you get the chance to scale, man, do you scale. But moving on to Morgana. Now Morgana is getting more of a visual rework as opposed to a full rework similar to Kayle, but that still means that there are some changes happening to Morgana regardless. So for instance, her W now is a lot more powerful at executing your targets, so a little bit less damage when they're fuller HP, but a lot more damage when they're lower HP. Following that, her ultimate now also gives her a bunch of movement speed whenever walking towards your chained target to essentially help you get the second part of your ultimate off. And believe it or not, this buff to her ultimate is actually massive because this extra movement speed makes it extremely easy to stick onto your target and to make sure they get stunned. All in all, both of these reworks are definitely quite interesting to say the least. I think the Kayle one is going to be extremely interesting to see how it goes in solo queue just because of how bad the early laning phase is. But I definitely expect Kayle to have a fairly low win rate upon release, while Morgana should have essentially the same if not higher upon release. Now the next thing I want to talk about for this video is going to be apparently some new cat versus a dog event. Now there's not a lot of detail on the PBE at the very moment, but what there is you can see here, a bunch of cat and dog facts. Now Riot has essentially confirmed before that they are doing a cat versus dog event, so maybe it'll be coming out next patch, maybe it won't, I'm not entirely sure, but I thought I'd bring it up regardless in case you're not aware it's even coming at all, or in case maybe you needed a little bit of an update. But now let's move into the actual changes coming to the champions themselves, starting off with Akali. Now Akali a few patches ago got one of the biggest nerfs we've seen in a long time, to where it essentially gutted the champion by quite a bit, and she sat out below 40% win rate. Well, finally, Akali is getting some much needed buffs, and it's going to be starting off with her passive, where essentially the movement speed gained away from enemies towards the outer ring of the passive, of course, has been extended to be half the duration of the ring itself, which is 2 seconds. And after crossing the ring, getting the extra movement speed is also now 2 seconds. This is both a buff and a nerf because now the movement speed you gain within the ring lasts a bit longer, but the movement speed you gain when exiting the ring is a little bit shorter. But it does not stop there just yet, because as we move on to her W, you can see here, now she's only revealed by the turrets if she's within the attack range of the turret, not the turret sight range. Now this is a buff because the turret sight range is naturally a lot longer than the actual attack range. On top of this, Akali only needs to exit and re-enter the shroud one time now to extend the duration of the shroud by 3 seconds rather than before, which is up to 6 times. Next up, we have a buff to her E ability where the first part of the E, the damage on this has been increased by 40 by rank 5, but the second part of the E, where you take the shuriken and you actually just run to the opponent, the damage on this has been lowered by 10 at every rank. And last but not least, the ultimate cooldown has been lowered by a bit as well. All in all, some nice utility buffs coming over to the Akali, of course, with the extra movement speed with her passive that lasts a bit longer when you're inside the ring, which is important. And on top of that, of course, you also have the extra buffs towards Twilight Shroud and the damage buff on the E. But having said that, Akali is still going to be struggling in the laning phase because she no longer has the sustain built within her kit, which is still a very big issue. Moving on, we have some quick buffs coming over to Cho'Gath, more specifically towards his E of Vorpal Strikes. The spike damage has been increased by 2 at rank 1 and by 10 at rank 5. This is an ability that honestly I wouldn't be surprised if people might even max first or second now because of just how powerful it is by the time you get it to rank 5 and how much more damage you're getting with every auto attack. But speaking of tanks and top lane champions, we have a buff coming over to Dr. Mundo, more specifically towards his E, Masochism. The magic resistance per stack has been increased from 2% to 3%, however, the max stacks have been changed from just getting less max stacks overall. However, this is overall worth it because at rank 1 it's actually the exact same, however, by the time you get it to rank 5, you'll be getting a lot more magic resistance because even though you're having only 14 stacks as opposed to 15 stacks, every stack is worth 3% rather than 2%. So this will make Mundo a pretty effective counter to AP champions top lane or just an AP heavy composition. Next up, we have some buffs coming over to Gangplank, a champion that hasn't really been seeing buffs or nerfs for quite a long time. Starting off with his E ability Powder Keg, the bonus damage has been increased by 20 at rank 1, but as you rank it up, it evens back out to 180 at rank 5, which is the same as live servers. But moving along, we also have his ultimate Cannon Barrage, where the damage per wave has been increased at every single rank, 5 at rank 1, but all the way up to 15 by rank 3. Now obviously 15 damage and honestly even 5 damage doesn't seem like a lot, but don't forget that's 5 damage per wave and he fires 12 waves of cannonballs, so assuming every single one hits, even just at rank 1, that's 60 extra damage, which really isn't all that bad. Next up, we have one of the quickest buffs this patch, which is towards Graves, where his base damage has just been increased by 3. Now, this is really not that bad because don't forget, not only does this affect his auto attacks, but this will also affect his basic abilities in general and how they scale. Next up, we have a quick buff coming over to Jhin towards his Q ability, where the AD ratio has been slightly increased. Now, this isn't going to affect Jhin too much. I mean, sure, it's a buff regardless, but I don't think it'll actually make his win rate spike or anything like that, and I don't think it'll actually make that much of a difference, and I bet most people will forget his Q even got buffed when they play the new Jhin. But next up, we have some spicy changes coming over to Neeko, and I also think this champion next patch is going to be busted as hell. Anyways, the changes to her E as follows. So no longer does the last champion hit condition apply to her E ability, which is really good because now you can actually use it on multiple champions. Apparently there was a bug where it can sometimes disarm enemies, so that's no longer a thing, and enemies hit to empowered missile has been lowered from 2 to 1, which empowers your laning phase, since now you only have to get it through one instance of minions, like 1 melee, 1 ranged, etc., which is a lot more powerful. This will also make her more powerful in team fights, so if you land a massive E ability and hit all 5 champions, the 4 champions that you hit after the first one will get the empowered duration and etc. So all in all, some pretty spicy buffs coming over to Neeko, so definitely want to watch out for this champion in the next patch. Next up, we have a nerf coming to Nunu, and thank goodness for this because this champion is one of the best junglers at the moment, of course Rek'Sai being number 1. So the base HP on Nunu is being lowered by 20 and the healing on the Q is also being lowered by 40 by rank 5, which is a decent amount, so I think that's going to be hopefully enough to not make him completely busted. Next up, a very quick change to Rakan's W Grand Entrance, where the damage and the speed have both been changed and increased. This is more or less to make up for the nerf that Rakan received a few patches ago, which made him pretty damn bad. We also have some changes coming over to Skarner, which I did talk about in a previous video, but we'll quickly touch on it right now. The Spires, first of all, which is his passive, no longer appear on the minimap, so enemies can't tell when you capture them. The Spire radius is being increased up to 1600 rather than 1150, which is a massive increase. And the red side Spires have moved now to be in range of Krugs and Raptors, which overall should be a buff to Skarner, so honestly, don't be surprised if you start seeing this champion in the next patch as well. Now we have some changes coming over to Sylas towards his W. The TLDR is essentially if you're building AP, it's more powerful. If you're building tank, it's less powerful. Because the base damage got nerfed, but the damage and healing AP ratio have both been increased by 10%. Also, I'm sure you guys remember the Teemo rework I made a video about. I did a full gameplay, etc. Well, it's actually getting reverted. Now, it's not getting completely scrapped. It's more of just Riot is not ready to release it. They put it on PBE to get some early testing, and that's about it. And it's back to the drawing boards to see what else they should change. So keep that in mind. The Teemo rework is not coming out this patch, nor is it coming out in the next few patches either. Next up, we have a buff coming over to Tryndamere towards his passive Battle Fury, where essentially you're just getting more crit chance per Fury at the moment. This is going to be a massive buff to Tryndamere because this will make his laning phase a lot more powerful early on and just throughout the game in general. And we have the mini rework for Vi. I believe finally coming out after several patches of being reverted. Now I've went over this so many times already, so let's go over it one more time very quickly. Her passive Blast Shield, the cooldown on this ability is now a little bit longer, but the shield is just overall more powerful. But proccing your W reduces the cooldown on your passive. Her Q ability has reduced scaling, but it no longer deals reduced damage to minions and monsters, which is a buff to Jungle Vi in general. The W attack speed is being increased. Your E ability can now critically strike and has an increase in AP ratio, but a decrease in AD ratio. And your ultimate knocks back other champions and targets around your main one much further now, and also does more base damage but lower scaling. And the final change to champions is going to be Yorick towards his ultimate, where the maiden damage has been lowered and the maiden on-hit damage has also been lowered as well, because this thing was way too powerful. Now last but not least, we also have some changes to items and runes, starting with the Relic Shield line, where you're going to notice now it no longer gives you flat value plus missing health whenever you actually heal from it. Instead now it heals based on missing HP. So it might be more beneficial to now wait for Relic Shield to where your AD carry is lower on HP to proc it rather than just proccing it for the sake of proccing it. On top of this, we also have a buff coming over to Stormrazor, where the AD has been increased and the attack speed has been increased as well, since no one was really getting this item anymore, so they had to buff it a little bit. Next up, we have a nerf coming over to the new Conqueror, to where the adaptive force is being lowered to now being 2 to 6 rather than 2 to 10, which is a fairly decent nerf on top of already the previous nerfs already got. And the final thing is Cut Down, where this rune's damage is just flat out being increased. And the final thing, how can we forget, 2 new skins coming out. Of course, we have the KDA Ahri Prestige Edition and Arc-like brand. But either way guys, that is it for this video. There you have it, a bunch of changes coming out to this patch, new events, reworks, and a whole bunch of other stuff as well. Let me know down in the comments below what you think the biggest changes are going to be next patch and what you're most looking forward to. But if you enjoyed the video, then don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't, check out my other videos, and I'll see you for the next one. Peace.